So, Bob, we have a bunch of emails here for us to read and answer. What do you say, Bob?
I say, let's answer some emails.
I had a sudden urge to call you like Bobberino or Bobby G or the Bobster.
Oh, man.
Dear Kirk and Bobberino. That's odd that the anonymous patron is saying Bobberino.
Did they actually say that?
No, just joking.
Oh, okay.
After hearing about the rise of anti-Asian hate crimes and the Atlanta shooting, I looked at conservative and Republican subreddits to see if they were also worried, because I also don't believe that all Republicans or conservatives are racist, sexist, bigoted, etc. However, I was dismayed that a lot of them in the subreddits interpret the events as quote-unquote liberal media pushing a narrative against whites, or not a hate crime because it's just one event, or Asians are only caring because liberal media choose to report them, etc. I just have to know, are there Republicans or conservatives that care and acknowledge anti-Asian hate? Bob, I don't know if you know anything about this, but do you have any thoughts?
I wonder about this.
Yeah. The way I would answer this question is, number one, if you're on Reddit, and I've done this before too, you have to understand that's not necessarily a representation of conservatives. So if you go to the there's a subreddit that's just, I think it's just called conservatives or something. And if you look at the narratives that are on those subreddits, I don't think it represents all conservatives. I think sometimes the moderators will even kick out conservatives who have more moderate views, and it becomes really one-sided. I don't know if subreddit conservative, if our conservative is like that, but I remember seeing that, and it's on the left too. So I think subreddits have a tendency to get rid of the moderate voice. But the question is, are there Republicans or conservatives that care about anti-Asian hate? Yeah. I have Japanese American relatives who are Trump supporters. And these are people that grew up in the 50s and know racism very well and know anti-Asian hate very well. Having said that, many liberals are freaking racist. I mean, I live in Seattle, which is something like 90% liberal and Democrat, and I've experienced racism my entire life. Much less racism than I have in other parts of the country, by the way. But it's not like liberals are not racist. I mean, liberals can be some of the most racist people on the planet, really. And by the way, another thing here is that Asian American racism is not new. A lot of people right now are like, whoa, there's this new thing, it's like, no, it's randomly being talked about right now in a way that in some ways has never been talked about. Anyway, here's another email. So we have a bunch of emails about professionalism because last time we talked, Bob, that we didn't get to all of them. Anonymous listener, she says, it took me a long time to reach out and find a counselor. I started seeing one who was a licensed clinical professional counselor, an LCPC. She was fine at first, so I slowly opened up to her. For some reason, she started asking me for the names of the people I was talking about. And then when I told her the names, she told me that these were clients of hers. And she told me confidential information about these people. I was so shocked, I didn't know what to do. I am worried that other people may have experienced this, and it makes me skeptical of therapy in general from other clinicians. Are there ways to help protect yourself or others from this situation? Bob, what do you think?
Well, two things. One is it's a very small sample size that you have. You have a sample size of 1. So hold it loosely, this feeling that you have about counselors in general, since it's based on, like most people's views are based on your own personal experience. Makes sense that you'd pay attention to your experience on the one hand, and on the other hand, you are telling us that you just have seen this one counselor. There are many, many, many good therapists who have good boundaries and good ethics, and so hold that loosely, please. You can do a couple things. You can speak to the counselor about her. Is it her? I think it's her.
Yep.
Her behavior. You can always report her to your state's ethics board, and they will intervene. I guess those are the two things that pop into my head. Do you have any thoughts?
A little sort of asterisk. If you hear some random voice in the back of the conversation, it is you're not hearing voices. It's Bob's wife, Colleen, talking in the background. So just know that because of the pandemic and we can't record in person, I cannot control all audio anomalies. So I hope you can barely hear it, Bob, by the way, so don't worry about it. But
I can't hear it hardly at all with the headphones on.
Because some people might be just going, wait, am I hearing? Is there something weird going on here? I assume she's working, because you both work from home, right? So it's not like she's working. So it's like you got to do what you got to do, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so anonymous listener, you're talking to your counselor. She asked for names for some weird reason, and then she's like, "Oh, I know that person. In fact, that's a client of mine." And da 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 da. Yeah, this is awful. It is sort of surprising, but not really. I've seen this before. It drives me nuts. Why would someone do this? Well, I would say that it's due to bad training, or they forget their training. I think there's also a potential aspect of narcissism or psychopathy spectrum that, the rules don't really apply to me. I'm invincible, or impaired empathy, or an urge to seem knowledgeable about people. Because I've had that urge when I hear about something, whether it's a trainee, student, or client. And, I've had famous clients before. And I mean, have you had any famous clients before? People who, people would know if, or at least a percentage of the population would know, a politician or, some famous. Yeah.
One.
Yeah. I've had famous clients before. And when in conversation, the person comes up, I have an urge to be like, hey, that's my client.
Yeah.
Or if they're on television, I'll be like, hey, that's my client. It's narcissism. You want to show off. You want people to think that you're special and that you matter and that you're connected somehow to fame. And it, is a fleeting thought. And I immediately, that's ridiculous. Of course, I can't say anything.
Sort of a natural human.
Right. But if you're really narcissistic and you're really desperate for that kind of accolade, then you will shove your better judgment out of the way, and you will quote unquote show off. And sometimes that can apply even to non-famous people. It's like, you're connected. I know that person. Hey, I know that person. That person is, that person comes to me and talks to me about, they share things with me. And so I've seen that before. Now, I don't know about your therapist. They're not here to defend themselves, but I'm so sorry that's happening. It is reportable to the licensing board. I mean, there's really no ifs, ands, or buts about that scenario. There's no excuse. Under no circumstances is that okay. And so, and you have every reason to be shocked and to be worried about this, because for you to believe that your therapist is not talking about you with other people is delusional or wrong-headed. That this therapist needs to be stopped, not from providing therapy per se, but they need to be told what's up. And that's usually what happens in situations like this. Is they get reported to the licensing board. Licensing board says you must take trainings on confidentiality and get supervised for a while. They usually don't strip someone of their license completely, because this isn't really, unless you can demonstrate that the person that this caused tremendous amount of harm. I mean, there are people who literally have sex with their clients and only have their license taken away for like a year. So there are cases where it's taken away permanently. But anyway, so you're asking, are there ways to help protect yourself or others from this situation? Well, sometimes if you're looking for a therapist, word of mouth can really help, because you can ask, does this therapist really hold confidentiality very important to them? Another thing is to tell your therapist about your concerns up front and often, and remind them. I've done that before. Because as a professor and as a person who or at least a lot of therapists know me in the community, even before I had this podcast, I would sometimes tell my therapist, I'd be like, so by the way, I know a lot of other therapists, and if you talk about me with colleagues, that will compromise my confidentiality, and I don't want to be paranoid about that. So can you just not talk about me in any kind of way unless we talk about it first? Mm-hmm. And, if someone said that to me, I'd be like, oh, okay, sure, I don't mind. And it would just sort of galvanize my dedication to that with some clients if they sort of reminded me of that.
Not that necessarily somebody would, but that kind of, when you say such a thing, you're letting them know how important it is to you, which is, going to have an influence, a positive influence on somebody holding your privacy. They might do it anyways, but now they're extra motivated. So I like the idea of speaking up about such a thing.
Right. Yeah. So pretty awful. I mean, have you heard of other therapists doing this sort of thing, Bob?
I probably have, but nothing comes to mind right now.
I mean, I've certainly seen other and I'm guessing you have as well, where they consult with you and will give way too much identifying information.
Yeah, that's happened.
Unnecessary. And you're just like, whoa, I know exactly who you're talking about. Why did you just tell me that? That was unnecessary in this consultation. Usually
I just gently remind, we don't have a release for you to tell me that, so let's keep it. And I have been on listservs, these therapist consult websites, and there's a constant admonition, please don't reveal a certain level of detail that could make somebody identifiable. And then the other thing is when I participated in couple therapy consultation, what they always say is, if we're watching video of a couple and anybody here knows this couple, please let us know and then leave the room so that we can protect the couple's privacy. Therapists take this very seriously. People really do care about our privacy. They want to hold our confidence because it's good for us as a field, but it's also good for the welfare of the people that we serve. And therapists get into this because they wish to be helpful.
Yeah, and experienced therapists or therapists that know better know that it really puts the therapist in a bind. I mean, if I somehow now know, if you stay in that consultation and you watch a couple that now whenever you see that couple, you have to act like you don't know stuff about them. That's a huge burden. Yeah. And I don't want that. I'm really bad with secrets, by the way. So it's sort of funny. At one level, I'm like, I would like to think of myself as very good at keeping secrets as a therapist. I feel like I've been, appropriately paranoid about that throughout my career. On the other hand, outside of that, I am terrible with secrets. Stacy even knows that about me. She'll say, so I'm about to tell you something, but you have to, categorize this as something that you can't tell them, if she's telling me a secret about a friend or something. And throughout my life, I have a really hard time remembering that for some reason. And I don't know what it is about me. I think I just am not sensitive to other people's. It's like if I don't feel the reason why we need to keep it secret, then it's hard for me to remember that I'm supposed to keep it secret. Right. Like they'll tell me something and I'll say, well, I can see why that they would want to keep that secret, but they don't need to keep that secret. It's not shameful or anything. It's just a normal thing it's an unfortunate thing that happened or whatever. And I have a hard time remembering because it's not emotional to me, I guess. Anyway. Another email, anonymous listener, she says, I have been seeing a therapist for several years. He recently made a comment that I was attracting negative behavior from men on dating sites. This is the first time I have disagreed with something he said. I told him I disagreed, and he did not respond well. After I explained that online dating opens women up to nefarious behavior at no fault of their own, he said that I was being feisty and angry. Am I right to believe he is overstepping bounds and making assumptions? Bob, what do you think?
Well, what I think is the accusation or the being called feisty and angry. It's the implication is that being angry or I'm not sure what feisty means, is a bad or a wrong thing. Right? Like, I shouldn't speak up to my therapist because, that's clearly a sign of resistance or my own transferential whatever. And, I don't buy that. You have a voice, you're using it, and your therapist's having a reaction to that, probably.
Yeah.
Like, you might be angry and whatever feisty is.
Right.
Yeah. And so therefore what? You shouldn't? Is that the implication here?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a caveat before I say anything, he's not here to defend himself, and so we really have no idea.
We don't know.
But I've seen this sort of thing before. It's male privilege. For many men, they just have no idea. They're completely ignorant to what it's like to live as a woman in this society. And the example I always give was this situation with Rebecca Watson, who was a podcaster, a science reporter, science podcaster. And it was this huge controversy in the skeptical scientific nerd world. She went to this convention where there were a lot of people that knew her. And it was in Vegas. And so it was late at night and she was alone. She's getting in the elevator to go back up to her hotel room. And someone else got in the elevator with her. And it was a long elevator ride up. And so it's just her and this, and she's short and small, and this guy's tall and bigger. And he turns to her while they're in the elevator and he says, "Hey, you're Rebecca Watson. I really like your stuff." And he's chatting her up, and she's like, "Oh, okay, thanks." And, she's been getting that all day because it's at a convention of some sort. And then a little bit into the elevator ride, he says, "I'm having a party in my room right now. You want to join me?" And she's like, "No, thank you." And then when they get off the elevator, she's slightly worried that he might follow her off the elevator and know what room she's in. And then she gets back into her room and she tweets or something publicly that she's like, "Hey, guys, if you're in an elevator with a woman by herself, don't ask her to come back to your room with you." Something like that. Well, this caused a huge uproar because a lot of people, a lot of men, a lot of privileged, unaware men were saying, "Well, what's the big deal? He just, looks up to you and wanted to talk more with you. It was probably innocent. You're assuming that he's some sort of criminal that wants to harm you or something." And what she said is, "No, I wasn't assuming that, but how am I supposed to know?" And what men don't know, most men don't know, is that women are walking around in a constant state of legitimate, natural fear, under justifiable fear, is this the moment where I get assaulted? Because women are assaulted at an alarming high rate. And so on average, they're going to be like, well, yeah, 95% of the time, this isn't a person who wants to rape me. But a percentage of the time, this is the person that is trying to get me. They want to hurt me sexually or physically or something. This happens a lot. Most men aren't like that, but some men are. And so I can't know. And for the man to ask a woman who is by herself in the elevator, it's insensitive to that possibility. It's like you're walking, it's late at night and you're downtown Seattle and you're walking down the sidewalk. It's sort of isolated and there's a woman walking in front of you and she's by herself. You're not wanting to harm her. You're not the sort, you and I, Bob, if we're in that situation, we know that we don't want to hurt that person. Like you couldn't pay us. There's no amount of money that you could pay us that would, get us to want to hurt that person. There's just nothing there's nothing you could do to force us to want to hurt that person. And yet, even though I know that, I will stop and let her get very far in front of me, or I'll change sides of the roads or something, because I know she doesn't know that about me. I know that she doesn't know that I'm not going to harm her, and so I want to give her a lot of space, because I know because I've heard enough from women and I have empathy for it, that they don't know that I'm not going to hurt her. And so that's one example of how male privilege can come up. And the reason why I give up the Rebecca Watson story was because it was the perfect story that would inflame privileged males and unaware males and inflame women who are like, no, you don't get it. You don't get what we deal with on a daily basis. And I was mostly aware of this, but when I heard Rebecca Watson, because I admit, my very first reaction was, why is she assuming that he's going to hurt her? But then when a little bit into it, I was like, oh yeah, of course. It's because I'm not a woman. I haven't experienced that daily fear, rational fear of all these things happening. So when you're talking to your therapist and he's a man, it's possible that he has unawareness, lack of awareness of his male privilege. And when you say, anonymous listener, that you are going on dating sites and you're experiencing negative behavior from men, maybe for him, he's like, well, I go on dating sites and I don't get that. He's like, you must be attracting that, which is what, you say that he said. You said that he said that you're attracting the negative behavior from men, and that you disagreed with him. He didn't respond well, and he said you're being feisty and angry. So it sounds like a relationship rupture. Mm-hmm. Tell him how you feel. Say, let him have it. Just be like, I think you're exhibiting male privilege. I don't appreciate what you said. I don't appreciate the fact that you didn't respond well when I disagreed with you. And let's talk about it. What a wonderful opportunity for you to get power in the world, to know your, your entitlement to being heard, and hopefully he reacts well to it. Mm-hmm. But you ask, am I right to believe he is overstepping bounds and making assumptions? I don't know. You clearly don't agree, and mm-hmm. you're probably hurt, and you feel like he's victim blaming. So, just talk about it. And I hate to say this, but if it doesn't go well, then you have to wonder if he's the right person for you, because you need to be with a therapist that understands privilege and understands your reality and understands, or at least is open to hearing about it. That's an important part of therapy, is a therapist that, at the very least is saying, questions themselves like, I have a client right now that's telling me that they're experiencing something. I'm having a hard time relating to it, but, let me listen to that more. Let me be mm-hmm. more curious about that, So at the very least, curious, because we can't expect every therapist to know every privilege and every victimization pocket. This is not a very small pocket in society, by the way. So you shouldn't be. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand. That's a funny analogy to say. Anyway, Shannon,
that whole elevator story.
Yeah.
What comes to mind is the difference between intention and impact. So if I'm a man and I'm reading that tweet, what I'm thinking perhaps is something like, well, me and everybody I know doesn't ever have that intention, so how could we possibly have that impact? But and so it's a failure in my own empathy to understand that my intention and my impact don't have to line up, and don't line up. If I'm a woman walking around in the world and this really tall guy gets in the elevator with me and I feel nervous, it doesn't matter whether that person has no intention to hurt me or not. That is the impact that they're having on me just by virtue of the situation. It's not good or bad. It's just what is. So I think that we can make room for this is impact regardless of intention.
Yeah, and the premise that I usually try to put out there in conversations like this is people don't walk around drumming up fears for no reason.
Yeah, right.
People have fears for good reasons. Now, you might not understand that fear. The fear could be overblown, but it's not like people wake up in the morning and say, ha, 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 I'm going to make up things to be afraid about. No one wants that. People have fears because either for completely legitimate reasons, like the ones we've been talking about, or they've been told things that are distorted, and they, you can't get them out of that in the moment at the very least. And just some compassion, some understanding, and stepping outside of your own narcissism, because I think that's what what kind of is the sticking point for a lot of men is, well, I'm not like that. I'm not going to do, I feel like you're accusing me of, no, you're not being accused of something. You're being asked to have empathy for someone else's experience.
Right.
So it's not about you.
Right.
It's about the individual who experiences a very scared world. It's sort of like when you, I'll tell this story because it's awful. It's kind of been on my mind, but so we got a new puppy, Princess Leia, and she was her and her older brother, Obi-Wan Kenobi, were both chewing on one of those dog chews that will disintegrate over time. It's like beef hide or something. And, they just gnaw on it for a couple hours. And I saw her chewing away at one, and I think this might have been maybe the second one she'd ever had in her life. And so, but I went up to her, and I like to play games with the dogs sometimes. And so I sometimes I'll grab their chew toy and give it back to them, and stuff, and just kind of play to keep away. But usually it's a chew toy and not something that they're eating. And so I went up to her and I grabbed the chew toy, and she was like, hey, give it back. And I gave it back to her. And then she started kind of growling a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, come on. And then she got real scared of me. Mm-hmm. And then she peed out of fear. She just started peeing. She was laying there, and I was like, oh my God. So I didn't know this, but apparently, and maybe a lot of dog owners out there are like, well, yeah, of course. I mean, I've had dogs a lot of my life, and I've never known this particular emotional reaction before of just utter fear. She's young, she's small. I don't know. Maybe this is the first time she's dealt with this sort of thing. She's a little skittish. And so was I being intimidating in the moment? No. Was I a threat? No. I was just playing what I thought to be a fun game. That was my intention. But now I have an appreciation for the emotional, instinctual state of a dog in that situation of, I have something that's very important to me, food, and food is, survival. And this bigger alpha dog is looming over me and dominating me and taking away my coveted piece of the pie. And this is very scary to me. So I now have a understanding of that fear. And even though I'm not being aggressive in my understanding, I'm being playful, I will adjust my behavior accordingly. It's a matter of empathy of the other person's experience. And that's the key, is when we feel like, I don't understand that, even if it's for people that are traditionally not held up as people we're supposed to care about. Like, earlier we were talking about conservatives and Republicans. And I, as a progressive liberal myself, I frequently will try, when I can, I'm not always successful, at having some understanding. I try to extend myself into their shoes. When I see something that a conservative is saying, I try to imagine, okay, where are they coming from? What is their fear? What is their pain? I'm seeing the anger. I'm seeing something that I think is not, understandable to me. But it must be coming from a good place. It must be reasonable. People are generally reasonable. And when we see unreasonable behavior, it's because they've been down a a road of reasonable behavior, and I'm seeing the end result of something that is just really quite different from my experience. And I find that to be one, much more comforting because it gives me hope in humanity. And two, obviously it helps me relate to a lot of various people, clients included, right? It's normal to have Republican clients, and if I can't extend myself into their shoes, then what kind of therapist am I, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, let's take a break.
So you're not going to call him feisty and angry?
Now you're being feisty. All right, let's take a break. When we get back, let's continue being feisty.
I say yes, feisty.
Hey, deserving listeners, as you know, I'm constantly recommending that people go to therapy. We all need therapy from time to time. One of the options available that is definitely worth checking out is BetterHelp.com. So if you're looking for a therapist, I would give it a try by going to BetterHelp.com/Kirk. Make sure you use the /Kirk because you get 10% off your first month, and it helps us out. I get a lot of emails from you saying that you're looking for a therapist. As you watch these videos, I know many of you have been motivated to find your own therapist. But I know it can be really hard to find a good one to work with. Like I said, one of the options available to try is BetterHelp.com/Kirk. And you should know that this service is available to clients worldwide, which is amazing. I've been told that you can start communicating with your therapist in under 24 hours. You can message with your counselor anytime. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions. And I've been told that it's often less expensive than in-person therapy. So go to BetterHelp.com/Kirk to get 10% off your first month of therapy today. All right, we're back from the break. Let's get to some more emails here. Shannon from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, Pennsylvania.
Oh, yeah. I am currently a PhD student getting my doctorate in counselor education and supervision. Or actually, no, I'm going to skip Shannon's and I'm going to skip down because I remember there are other things about dating on here that were kind of related. Okay.
Oh.
Let's see. Hi, Dr. Kirk and Bob. You have talked about how dating is a numbers game. I have been trying to play the game, but I have experienced some horrible sexism while doing this. I have been objectified and harassed. This is an anonymous patron, by the way. I have been objectified and harassed by men online. Some of this had to do with my gender as a woman, and some of it has to do with my sexual orientation as a bisexual. This has been very triggering to me, and it makes me want to give up on the pursuit of a partner altogether. I would share the details of what has been said to me and done to me, but it would re-traumatize me, so I won't mention it. I know that Bob went on hundreds of dates before he met Colleen, but I haven't. Isn't that funny that people know that now?
That is funny.
Yeah. But I haven't been able to find it, but I haven't been able to make it past the disgusting and dehumanizing messages I've gotten from men to even attend a date in over a year and a half. Can you talk about dating with reference to our patriarchal heteronormative society, Bob? What do you think?
I probably can't talk about that very well. When I think about this, I think of it as a trauma response to some crappy experiences from some men. One of the things I know about the internet is that the anonymity of it permits people, gives people a felt sense that it's okay for them to, mistreat people in this heinous way. And when I listen to this email, what I hear is a trauma response, and my bent is not to think about patriarchy, though I'm not saying that's not relevant. It's just not what I think about. I think about your life, your goals in your life, which is to have love and romance and connection, and you're inhibited by the anxiety that comes from being traumatized by this crappy behavior from men that are writing you on the internet. And my thought is, maybe that's worth your attention. Maybe that's worth treating, because at the end of your days, maybe what you want out of your life when you're 98 and a half and you're at the jumping off place and you're looking back over it, maybe part of what you're wanting is to see a life that was filled with love and connection and care and the things that people get out of their romantic relationships. I'd be apt to focus on that.
Yeah, that, and we live in a terribly sexist, patriarchal, abusive society to women, and objectifying of women, and a biphobic, heteronormative society.
Yeah.
And Bob and I, as heterosexual cis males, have the privilege of not experiencing any of that.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're a woman and a bisexual woman, you're going to get, you're just going to, because of our screwed up society, anytime anyone's like, well, we're beyond sexism, women can do anything these days. What are we talking about? Just go on a dating app and just sample the way women are treated on a dating app, and sample the way men are treated on a dating app, and ask yourself, is that balanced? Are men mistreated on dating apps? Sure. But the amount of crap that women get, I mean, it is astounding, especially if you have something kind of particular about your profile, or I don't know, you give off a certain attractive, sexy vibe or something. I mean, I've just seen it all, and it is atrocious. And as Bob says, anonymity. And when you are a psychopathic sadist, what better way to get your jollies off than online? And I want people to really understand this. We understand that there are people in the world who get off on harming other people in general ways and in sexual ways. They are criminals. They are sadistic. There's something wrong with them. And they are much more likely to comment online and do these kinds of things. So when you are interacting on the internet, when you're walking down the street, the chance of a psychopathic sadist, the chance of you running into one is pretty rare because they're pretty rare individuals. Two, the chance of you being targeted by them in most social circumstances is actually pretty rare. The chance of you coming across a psychopathic sadist online is extremely high because they're very because if you get off on harming other people sexually and just generally, to do so in person is to raise the risk of you being harmed yourself, because you could be reported to the police, you could be slapped in the face, you could be, shanked by someone, but you do it online, never a consequence. It's just not a problem. Now, I will say that most dating apps have the ability to report people. And if someone says something, even if you're not sure, report them. Because one, the website, I'm guessing, doesn't appreciate that kind of thing. It's not in their interest to allow psychopathic sadists to shun people from the dating site and, send people away. It's also possibly criminal. One of the most gleeful things that I do as a person on the internet is banning people or reporting them. It's almost a civic duty, really. When you see something, even if it's, like, that doesn't look quite right, stand up. That is, you're helping society by pushing back on these people. The fact that they get away with it often is because no one does anything, because we're afraid of some kind of consequence. Most reporting is done anonymously. Websites have no interest in outing you and causing some kind of kerfuffle. So report, and if you feel safe enough. But at the very least, it's awful to think about you, an honest patron, being like, okay, it's a numbers game. I want to meet my soulmate, and I've got to wade through a bunch of duds and a bunch of bad fits before I get to my Colleen. And I can't even begin to meet them because of all the re-traumatization that I'm experiencing. That is unfair.
It is. It's unfair. It's not right.
Yeah. So feel your pain, anonymous patron.
Well, as best we can. Right?
Yeah. Obviously, talk with your therapist about it. Report if you want. I'm guessing there are also other dating sites that have less of this. I'm just going to take a guess on that. There also might be ways of reducing the amount of abuse, like maybe modifying your profile somehow to Like if you didn't have a picture of yourself, for example, maybe that would have, that would obviously lower your chance of meeting anyone. But anyway, I'm guessing there's a way to sort of mess with the you shouldn't have to do that, of course, but I don't know. Maybe there's something. And again, I'm guessing there are dating websites that just have less of this, or they have more strict moderating protocols. There's a lot of dating websites out there, and I would look into that. Another dating app question, anonymous from Singapore, says, I'm in my mid-20s and trying to find love. I find myself being very critical of the people that I am chatting with on the dating app. I pick up on things that might possibly be a red flag to reject the guy. I also have problems with opening up emotionally. Also, I have a very idealized image of love and family, which I am not sure if I'm able to create in my own life. Is there a way to be less critical and more open? Bob, were you this way? My impression was you were not this way.
I don't think I was this way.
Yeah. What advice do you have to Anonymous in Singapore? As our resident expert on dating apps.
Oh yeah, right, yeah. It's been a while. When I hear this, what I'm guessing is that there may be some attachment insecurity coming up, and I'm wondering about if you're not in personal counseling, if you would want to seek that as a way to have a corrective experience of feeling safe and connected at the same time. I wonder if your brain is filtering people out, reflexively saying no to this one, no to that one, as a way of protecting yourself.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I heard. Your themes are you're being critical, you're looking for an excuse to reject someone, you have problems opening up emotionally, you have an idealized image of love, but you're aware, which is just fantastic. I mean, every way you're describing this, there was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You were just like, this is me, and I don't know, it's kind of interesting that I do this. Yeah, I agree with Bob. It sounds self-protective. It's safer to reject early than get rejected yourself. Mm-hmm. It's also possible that you have a critical interject from your childhood where someone was very critical of you, and now you are recreating that relationship by identifying with the abuser, essentially, and treating everyone on the dating app as if it was you, and you are now like your parent or something in that equation. It's also possible that you're just not ready to date and you're just looking for an excuse to avoid it. So I would really assess that.
Yeah, none says you have to. I did do a version of this.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did. When I was in grief over a breakup, I was on dating website and meeting people, and I think I was dismissing them. I don't know if, let's see, how do I say this? I think I was dismissing them because they weren't my ex, and I think I was telling myself I won't ever be happy again. And I think really what it was for me was avoidance of grief. And when I started to actually grieve the loss of the thing, that was quite painful. That was a very conscious, wakeful choice to do that, but one of the best things I did. And it was only then that I think my heart was open to the possibility of my Colleen showing up. I think I probably would have dismissed her if I hadn't done the grieving.
I feel like we should have a shirt that says we all deserve a Colleen.
I like it.
Or something like that. Or I'm searching for my Colleen.
Yeah, right on.
Or I hope everyone can find their own Colleen.
Right. I like it.
How would Colleen feel about that?
I think she'd probably feel embarrassed and tickled all at once.
You better not ever break up, because there's a lot of people depending on the two of you staying together to give them hope.
I think we're a pretty good safe bet, guys.
Another possibility for you, Anonymous in Singapore, is that you have a fear of imperfection and you are a perfectionist and you're applying it to dating. Another possibility is that you've incurred some sort of elitism and you might be in a cultural pocket. Singapore can have this, by the way. It's not like the United States can't, but Singapore can as well. There are cultural pockets in various parts of the world where you have this need to impress the other elitists in your cultural pocket. And if there's that kind of notion flying around. You might want to kind of question the oppression that essentially the group is imposing on you. There was another question about dating that I wanted to try to find. It was actually from Natasha from California. Where is Natasha? Here it is. Upper tier patron Natasha from California. She says, is it normal or common to have a sense of elation after breaking up with someone? I have only been broken up with once, and that was awful. But every time I break up with someone, I get a sense of power. I think I'm disorganized attachment, by the way. I think it's like I'm leaving them before they can leave me, and I get this sort of rush from it. It sounds pretty pathological as I'm typing it out. I realize it stems from childhood attachment wounds, but is it more predictable among certain attachment style lines, like with disorganized? Bob, what do you think?
I don't know, but I like that you're thinking about it, and I like that you're asking the question. And I'm curious about what you mean by rush and sense of power. Like, if you were going to be more granular in your description of that, what would you say actually happens inside you? Where do you feel it in your body? What kinds of images or stories go through your mind? Because that's where you're going to learn about yourself. So there's that scene in The Wizard of Oz where Dorothy and the gang are standing in front of the big booming wizard and the smoke and the flames, and they're all quaking, right? They're all see all that loud, and they're quaking in the smoke and so forth, right? And the dog runs over to the curtain and he yanks on it, right? And you see this vulnerable old guy behind the curtain, right? And they look at him, and he knows he's being seen, and so what he does is he says into his little mic thing, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain, right? And then he pulls the curtain shut, and he doesn't want to be known or seen. I get the feeling that perhaps for you, somewhere inside is some vulnerable part of you that's behind a curtain saying, I am powerful, I'm the great and powerful, but perhaps there's something inside that feels really, really vulnerable. I think that's worth your attention. I hope you'll take a peek.
Yeah. Yeah, just disorganized attachment is characterized by fear of being harmed by closeness. The closer you get to someone, the more afraid you get because of very good reasons. You were close to people who harmed you when you were growing up, and as you get close to someone, when you're romantically involved with them, there's a corresponding amount of terror that is accompanied by it. You desperately want closeness, you need closeness, and you haven't had enough of it in your life, in all likelihood, if you suspect you suffer from disorganized attachment. And so you deserve it, you need it, and you're trying to get it, but as you go closer, there's an increasing amount of terror and of fear, and that will harm you, and it's normal to have conflict in relationships where actual harm is happening. And when we were young, we were not able to defend ourselves. But now that we're an adult, we can exert our power and defend ourselves. And that can feel very good, in the same way that, I don't know, like imagine being able to go back in time and telling your parents with your adult self, screw up. Like, Bob, do you ever fantasize about that? Do you ever fantasize?
Occasionally I'll have that kind of, yeah.
Like what? What
I wish I would have done, or what I wish I could have said, or yeah. I can't say I dwell in that land too often, though occasionally I suppose I wander into that. Lately, I was thinking about a time when I did stand up for myself, and sort of curious about could I have taken that further? Could I have done more? And why didn't I get whacked for it? That's the closest that comes to mind right now related to what you're asking.
Yeah, it could be considered, you're saying dwell. I would say it's a corrective experience because it can, at least imaginally, correct for what happened. It can make us feel like, okay, I let him have it, even though we know we didn't really do that. But a part of our emotional center believes that we did, because it doesn't know the difference between imaginal and reality. And so it can be a good thing. And so when one breaks up with someone, it's like I'm getting that experience of power, and boy, does that feel good.
Yeah.
Now, I think, Natasha, you're wondering, it's just like, am I a psychopath? And it doesn't sound like it. What it sounds like is the normal elation from, I have the power. I now can do things.
Does Natasha want to have power before the breakup? Like while she's in the interaction with the person? In other words, have power and then see them later. Let's presume that, they're late for the 5th time and it bugs you, right? I could imagine being elated when you like escape from frustration, chronic frustration about stuff that bugs you in a relationship. And the best way is to just end the relationship and walk away. And it's like, that feels powerful. I spoke up, right? Is there a way to catch it sooner so that if they're late 5 times and you don't want that kind of life where they're going to be late a 6th time, you actually exercise your power in the relationship, still in the connection with the other, and they actually have an opportunity to shape up. You have an opportunity to use your voice while you're in it, as opposed to use your voice as you walk away from it. That could be far more scary and also very far-reaching in terms of helping you heal and helping you learn how to have a voice, and that you're perfectly fine having a voice, and it's totally cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Shannon from Pennsylvania. Let's get back to Shannon.
Shannon, right on.
Good old Penn. I am currently a PhD student getting my doctorate in counselor education and supervision. I have my master's and am currently gathering supervision hours for my LPC. I work with substance use disorder clients and co-occurring clients. My training focused on mental health counseling, but I have a recent interest from your YouTube and podcasts in working with couples. I want to do this ethically. Do you recommend any trainings or certifications specific to couples counseling that could build upon my foundation? So, Bob, this is exactly you.
This is me.
You come from the mental health counseling world, the licensed professional counselor world, which doesn't tend to have a lot of training in couples counseling, and for some, considered to be just not their field. There's a field called marriage and family therapy, which obviously is geared towards that. You are now one of the best, if not the best, couples counselor I know.
Oh, thanks.
So how'd you get there?
Well, circuitously, I live in Seattle, so I started with Gottman method couple therapy training, in large part because that was local. And I'm a bit of a training snob, so I want to go where the good trainers are. And this is like ground zero. This is the mothership of Gottman method training. So I pursued that for a number of years, I think, maybe 6-7 years, something like that. And
so at the Gottman Institute.
Yeah, through the Gottman Institute, and I did like 95 or 98% of all the things that you need to get certified in Gottman therapy, and also discovered that I don't care for it, and I don't think I was particularly helpful to people in using it. And so,
tell me if this is true, because I actually teach this in my applied couple therapy class, which is actually starting soon, and we're going to be doing it over Zoom, which is going to drive me crazy. But anyway. But it's a 4-credit class now, and that means that I have a lot more time, which I'm happy about. Anyway, what I find about Gottman, this is just personally, is that the data and the observations and the language around the 4 horsemen and the understanding of what leads to goodwill and the normalization is wonderful and very helpful. But the method, I find, does not resonate with me. I could see how it could work. It's the same with EFT, honestly, is if someone was really into it and sort of bought into the model, I could see them making it work as a therapist, for sure. But I guess given that I was already a sort of integrative couples therapist by the time I came across the Gottman method, I always was like, oh, this does not fit with me. Same with EFT, honestly. Even though both the foundations of EFT and Gottman, I really agree with, and it helps me. I frequently will tell couples, or at least some version of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse,
Sure.
What is it? Contempt, stonewalling, defensiveness, and criticism? Something like that.
Yes.
And I will talk about that, or at least I'll assess it in my head. I'm like, I just heard contempt. Whereas before Gottman, I don't know if I would have been as worried, I suppose, because I would have been like, of course people have contempt, it just happens. But now it's like, contempt, alarm bells. I have to help them, or at least alert them to that mindset as a as the fly in the, or what would you call it? Like a virus, really, that infects one's love. It grows like the Borg or something. It assimilates. And anyway, I interrupted you.
No, you're fine.
But do you find that to be true about
Yes.
Gottman? Like I get the theory, or I get the data, and it helps, but the method isn't so helpful.
I couldn't have said it better. That's exactly how I see it. So I had already had some exposure to EFT. And, I went to a one-day training, and so I was at this crossroads. Do I pursue Gottman, or do I sound all right?
Yeah, you sound. Why?
Yeah, okay.
Something weird happened?
Something sounds different. Maybe it's my earphones. Anyways, pursue Gottman or pursue EFT. I was sort of going to do one or the other, and EFT was Canada. It was Ottawa. That's really far away. I don't know. I didn't know much about it. So I thought, okay, well, I'll just do this Gottman thing. And then switch gears probably 8 years ago, in large part because of couple therapy that Colleen and I were in at the time, which were EFT based, or at least at the time I thought it was EFT based. I started learning that model and started noticing a discrepancy between what EFT is and what was happening in our couple session, but stuck with the EFT anyways. And I really like that. What I like about it is it's in the present moment, here and now, what's happening between us, what are about the emotional messages that we're sending back and forth, which is really cool, because talking about, money or sex or how to raise the kids or whatever, that felt too like mediating. Like, I know how people should handle money or raise kids. I don't know. I'm not a parent. I don't know how to do that. But what I can do is I can pay attention to the emotional messages that folks are sending back and forth, and see how people are, impacting one another, and see how is it leading towards or away from a sense of connection and safety. Conflict cycle is going to lead people away from, and so leading them towards. And then oftentimes people, when they're feeling safe and connected, they know it's not such a big deal to figure out how do we want to raise kids or how do we want to spend money, right? There's, as Gottman says, that goodwill, what does he call it? Positive sentiment override between us, that, that's that stuff that happens where we have difference, but we still love each other at the same time.
Yeah.
So anyways, it was the hardest thing I ever learned. It took me years to learn it. And if I could do it over again, I would have pursued training more rigorously than I did at the beginning. So there's a 4-day intro course, right? So you take they call it externship. You take the externship, and then that sets the table for you to do the thing that they call core skills training. And that's a 4-weekend course where you learn the various stages and steps that are involved with EFT. It's very formalized treatment, though. You're not stuck in the manual. There's some room for flexibility, but it is very formalized, and I find that useful. What I did instead of pursuing that is I pursued supervision, thinking, all right, I'll learn this by having somebody sort of teach it to me. And I spent many, many hours in supervision with someone I just loved. She was fabulous.
Want to give her a shout out?
Yeah, Lillian Buchanan, my old EFT supervisor. And
she's Seattle?
Now she lives in Texas.
Oh, okay.
Lovely, and a great therapist. I think anybody that's lucky enough to have Lillian for the therapist is very lucky indeed. And if I could do it over again, though, I think what I would have done is I would have gone and gotten training, which when I went to finally get training, I thought this is just going to be a waste of my time, because I've been doing this, learning this with Lillian for years, 3-4 years. But actually the training itself was really eye-opening. It helped me solidify my understanding, helped me grow. And then what I found is that I could actually apply I could combine that with what's happening in my supervision with Lillian and do a better job for my couple. So if it were me, that's what I would do. Shannon, that's what I would do, as I would go get training in EFT, if that model appeals to you. It appeals to me.
Yeah. And the EFT training, or the principles of it, are, in my view, definitely a must regarding couples therapy efficacy.
Yeah.
And most issues that people bring into couples therapy are right down the middle of EFT. Now, I will say that there's a lot of roads to understanding the principles of EFT.
Yes.
For me, for example, EFT wasn't very popular when I was coming up, and I was much more influenced by Satir and object relations and attachment theory, which EFT is also influenced by. So there's other roads, and but however you get to attachment-based understanding of people's vulnerabilities, injuries, and communication, and effective communication about attachment needs and injuries is a must.
If I were Shannon, even if I was going to pursue EFT, if I was pursuing something that were attachment-based, probably going to be okay.
Right. Yeah. And then I would recommend, as Bob is saying, understanding Gottman. And you can probably get that from the books, honestly. You wouldn't necessarily need to take the trainings.
No.
Although John Gottman is a wonderful speaker. Julie Gottman's pretty good too, but John Gottman he's just so engaging and funny and charismatic. And that's I've seen him speak in person, and he's just, I don't know what it is about that guy. He's just so... He could be a stand-up comic if he wanted to be.
Yeah, he's pretty funny.
I would also do some ancillary training in infidelity recovery. Very important. It's really quite specific, and maybe discernment counseling as well. The other thing is, as Bob said, is getting supervision from a senior couples therapist. This is really critical.
It is.
Without the training, without this, you need both. You need the training and the supervision, because it comes down to those moment to moment. You can be trained all you want, but until you actually run into the various walls, particularly countertransference wise, that you run into as a therapist with couples, because it does have the most countertransference by far, you're not going to know how to deal with it unless you have a supervisor or mentor who can be like, okay, I get you. I've been there. You're okay. Here's the perspective. Let's talk about it. That's really where the learning happens, in my experience. So, final word, Bob, on today's episode.
Oh, you know me. Whenever you say final word, I just like, okay, must perform now, and then I drop like. I think I just peed myself.
All right, well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself, and don't be ashamed of peeing yourself when you're put on the spot, because...
you deserve it.